Well, hello, Catherine Langman here. Welcome back for another episode of the Productpreneur Success Podcast. And today's episode is going to be a little bit different to my usual. There's not going to be any strategy or step-by-step training to do with sales and marketing or e-commerce specific things. And there's no inspiring guest today. I don't want to give you more information, really. I want this to be more about kind of offering support and encouragement at this moment in time, because I don't know about you, but there really does seem to be this kind of collective exhaustion that's hanging around in the air at the moment. And so I really just wanted to first check in with you all. Who of you is feeling a little bit deflated and exhausted at the moment? I mean, it's fine on the one hand to have that perpetual optimism and enthusiasm for our business, but it is pretty rare for us all to operate like, energizer bunnies all of the time and to just keep that going indefinitely. And particularly given it's been such a big few years for, most of us, if not everyone that I know, big years personally, professionally, globally. And right now, I know that many of you, as well as me and my team, we're frantically busy trying to get all the pieces in place for Black Friday and Christmas promotions, and we're really in the swing with all of that right now. We're busy with all of the marketing to generate as much income as possible during the tail end of the year. It's been a decidedly different and, frankly, a little bit disappointing year compared to last year's COVID-induced e-commerce boom time, right? So we're really busy right now, and I don't want to distract you from your implementation in your businesses right now. I know that you guys are all busy doing this stuff as well. I should stop using that B word. It's terrible. So today I'm just here to share some pearls of wisdom that I've been gifted through my years as a business owner that have really helped me to thrive and also to come through periods that have been, perhaps stressful or that might have led to burnout had they been left unchecked. So I want to be able to pass these on to you as well. So if you're feeling the exhaustion creep in, or maybe just wondering if the hard work right now is going to be worth it all in the end, then this episode is for you. So over my 15 odd years as a business owner, I have worked with many different mentors and coaches over time. Some were really incredible, and learning from them really helped to facilitate fast, significant periods of growth, either personally or in my business. And I'd say that I'm also the kind of person who just likes to figure things out. I don't like repeating the same thing over and over again if it's not getting me the outcome that I want. Like, for instance, when I kept hurting my back trying to exercise like I used to before having babies. And eventually I just got so annoyed at myself for constantly going to the osteopath to put me back together every time I hurt myself that I realized I just really needed to find a trainer who could train my post-baby body safely. And I'm a bit like this with everything, and it probably annoys my family sometimes because I'm sure sometimes they would rather just stay comfortable and not have to learn my new ways of doing things all the time. But, I don't know. I feel like I'm a little bit on this constant journey to optimize my life so that I'm always moving closer to my dream life. Anyway, over time, I feel like there've been, these pearls of wisdom that have really accelerated things for me in business. And today I really want to share my top 3 with you. None of these things are, big business strategies. They're all kind of perspectives or approaches or practices that, in my experience, are really practical. You can adopt them today, right here, right now, and I reckon you'll start to feel like things will flow more easily and enjoyably for you, and hopefully, you'll feel a little bit more energized again. And the first critical skill that I want to talk about today that really helped me become a better business owner is finding a way of blending work and life that works for me in a sustainable way. And I wouldn't say this is exactly work-life balance as perhaps the original phrase might have been intended. I don't know whether a man or a non-parent came up with that phrase, I don't know. But in reality, as a woman and as a mother, as a business owner as well, all of those things, I've found this concept quite difficult throughout my career, right? I don't know if you've read the book, I think it's called Thrive by Arianna Huffington. She phrases it well though, and she talks about the problem with balance is that it's based on the idea that work and life, well-being and productivity, they're on opposite ends of a spectrum. But in fact, they're on the same side. We exist in both. So they don't need to be balanced. They rise in tandem. And, if you increase one and you increase the other, it is possible to increase one and increase the other. And that's, I guess it's more of a work-life integration, right? We're trying to bring our whole selves to work and also enjoy our whole selves in our personal life. So rejecting that idea that we should be choosing between one or the other. So what Arianna Huffington talks about is replacing work-life with life-work. So obviously, work is important and can give us purpose and meaning and income. It shouldn't take the place of life. And, whereas work is part of a thriving life, it shouldn't necessarily be the first thing, right? And I think most of us enter our adult lives and our careers, certainly I did anyway, without really thinking intentionally about a vision for my life and what kind of life I really wanted to create for myself. And I'm not talking about the I won a lottery version of life where we're magically transported into that, perhaps a movie ideal of a fabulous life. I'm not talking about that. I also think it's really common for women in particular to put our own happiness last after we've helped everyone else. This idea that I'll be happy when, and the when bit could be anything. When I've made $1 million, I'll be happy when my business is profitable enough to replace my previous salary. I'll be happy when my kids stop waking me up at night, or when I lose 10 kilos, or whatever you achieve, the thing that you're working on, right? But this type of thinking, it stems from a sense of lack, and it drives a lot of time-consuming hustle-type behavior that is really exhausting and impossible to sustain long-term. And it's easy to slip into behavior like always being on your phone to respond to customers, even when you're at the park with the kids, or having dinner with the family, or hanging out with friends, or whatever non-work related activity you might be doing. And I see so many mums in particular who end up working every day, every night, and every weekend, and it's exhausting and it's not sustainable and it leads to burnout. So here's what helped me. And I will say I did end up in burnout many years ago now. It's not fun. And here's what's helped me to recover from that and to avoid getting back to that. Number one, I did a vivid vision exercise about my own future life. And of course, what I wanted my life with my family to be like. So looking at what life do you want to be living in the future? And I love to do this in two ways. Number one is a vision board so that I can see it brought to life in images, and also as a letter to myself in 12 months' time, which I try and read each morning. In actual fact, I've written this letter as though it's the present tense. So I'm describing my future as though I'm living it right now, which kind of makes it a lot easier for me to imagine and visualize myself in that scenario and experiencing those things. Part of this vision exercise should also involve thinking about your own personal values that you want to live and to document that. So for me, one of my personal values is to have dinner together with my family every night, sitting around the dinner table and having conversation. And that means no phones at the table. Even when my kids were little, they started to be the ones asking me, "How was your day, mummy?" Because that's what I would ask them every dinner each night. And I will say, my teenagers now, they would be very tempted to have their phones at the dinner table, but we don't allow it. And if we don't take the time to be really clear about ourselves, or clear with ourselves about the life that we want to create and what's really important to us, then it's really easy to let others, like our customers or our social media followers, to dictate how we spend our time. And if others are directing our time like that, then we feel like we've lost autonomy over our lives. And then, the resentment can start to kick in, which is not great. So doing that kind of first exercise is super helpful. And then do an ideal day exercise. In fact, you can do ideal day, ideal week, ideal term if you're a school mum like me. It depends on how far down the track you want to think about this. But for me, I like to work in terms. That's just kind of how my life runs at the moment. And I'm not really sure where I got this exercise from originally, but I find that it is useful to do on a fairly regular basis, maybe once a year. And I guess that's because, you know, our personal lives do kind of change from time to time or from year to year. And again, it's about being really intentional about how you spend your time. But this is also a really great time management tool. Now, some of you would already know this, many of you don't. I'm one of 5 kids in my family, and I remember my mum telling a story from when I was little. So I'm the 4th of 5 children. And so I was really little, and so my mum's telling the story of another mum who had 1 child, saying to my mum, who obviously she had 5 kids and she was working and studying as well at this time, I don't know how you fit it all in. I've only got 1 child and she takes up all of my time. And my mum said, well, 5 kids can't take any more than that, which is true. We all get 24 hours in a day. Most of us will feel overwhelmed from time to time with how much we have on our plate, no matter, you know, what we have in our lives. But if you sit down and do this ideal day exercise and literally map out everything you do each day from when you wake up to when you go to bed and chunk those activities into blocks of time, it really helps you to feel a lot more in control over how your day will go. So for me, I start, and I've written this out, I start each day with some self-care, which for me involves some meditation, some exercise, and some healthy breakfast. And then I work during the day, and you know, I'll have time allocated for my work-related activities throughout each weekday. And then when it's time for dinner, I stop work, and then it's family time and wind down time. Usually I cook, A, because I love to cook and I'm good at it, and B, because my hubby and teenagers are usually not home from work or swimming training by then. My youngest does like to help me cook though, and then the older ones typically clean up. And then in the evening, I might help my youngest with her piano practice, and then usually she reads to me. I think I might have talked about this on the show before. She's reading the Harry Potter books to me chapter by chapter each evening, and we're finally into the last book now. And after she goes to bed, I'll normally journal for a bit, and I'll generally read a novel for myself as well. That's my wind down and switch my brain off from work-related thoughts strategy. Me personally, I tend towards having a busy monkey mind full of ideas. It's very hard for me to switch that off at night. And so for me, reading a novel really helps in a way that watching a screen doesn't. So no Netflix for me at night. Anyway, on weekends, it's time for family and friends, and also, of course, the usual boring household chores. Planning for food for the week, of course, in my family, that's a big thing. They eat so much. And I will say sometimes I will spend an hour on a Sunday afternoon thinking about or preparing for the week of work ahead, but it's uncommon for me to spend anything more than that working on the weekend. And on that note, I really want to challenge all of you mums out there running businesses to try and find ways to stop working at nights and on weekends. I know there are times that it is actually necessary to do so. For instance, you know, if it's the very early days, or maybe if you've got really young babies and children, and also right now being Black Friday around the corner, I know, you know, it's sometimes we need to go that extra mile or use those times of the day. However, most of the time, it is possible to achieve what you need to do in your business during weekdays. When I made that mental switch myself, my kids were little at the time, and then I set some rules and some boundaries in place about how I spend my time, I found the time constraints were actually really helpful for my productivity. And I also found that by not responding to customers on weekends, I was able to train them out of expecting to hear from me out of hours. And guess what? My business grew more, and I also had more energy and enthusiasm. I was more productive during those work hours, and I also enjoyed my time with my family more as well. So think of constraints a little bit like a pearl shell, a pearl oyster shell. You know, they're really, really tightly constrained, and inside that beautiful pearl is growing. I think Arianna Huffington put phrased a really helpful concept in saying, be present wherever you are. And so I found that a really helpful adjustment as a mum and as a business owner. And I would love to hear from you guys as well. What do you do, or how do you feel about time management and that work-life integration, maybe not necessarily work-life balance? The second critical skill that I have learned over my years in business was to not be the bottleneck, or to move away from being the bottleneck. I remember years ago, many years ago, in my first business, I met another mum business owner, and we were chatting about kids and business, as you do. And my kids were early school age, early primary school age at the time, and hers were older, so maybe tweens or early teens. And I was telling her that my boys, they were in like grades 1 and 2 at the time, would make their own school lunches. I taught them how to make sandwiches and to find some fruit and a snack. So normally I would bake some cakes or some cookies, and I'd taught them to pick one treat and one piece of fruit and then make their sandwich, which honestly was probably a slice of cheese and two pieces of bread, nothing fancy. And she was like, don't they make a mess though? And I'm like, of course they do. They're like 6 or 7 years old, but they're getting better at it. And she honestly couldn't fathom going through the pain of dealing with how badly they made their lunch and how much mess there would be. And what if she was judged by the teachers because her kids took the same plain, lunch to school every day? And, I'm sure you get the drift here. I see this scenario play out all the time in business, and I've totally been guilty of it in the past as well. Doing everything yourself because no one else does it to your standard, or it'll take too long to explain. So it's just quicker to do it yourself. Hands up if you're guilty of operating like that. Unfortunately, this attitude keeps us playing small in our business. We become the bottleneck to growth. So it really is essential that we find a way out of it. So first we need to reach a point of acceptance that other people will do things differently sometimes, and that's actually okay. I mean, obviously, if it's a life-threatening situation and something needs to be done perfectly the same, that's different. Of course, if we're going to go and have surgery, you want to be confident that your surgeon is going to be really precise and accurate and do the procedure exactly the same every single time. But most of us aren't doing brain surgery or rocket science in our business. Most of the things that you might hand off are either going to be operational, like order fulfillment or customer service, or production related to make your products, or marketing related, like social media or emails or ads and whatnot. All of those things are possible to automate, delegate, or outsource. What you should not be handing off is your vision and your planning and your management stuff. That's the essence of what makes your business and your brand unique. And it's also the area where your time can have the biggest impact on growth. But all that said, here are 2 steps to help you work out what you should hand off and how you can ensure that stuff still gets done as closely as possible to how you want it done. Number 1 is to do a time-sucking monster exercise. I think I've spoken about this on the show before, and it's an exercise that I still do about once a year. There's no need to make this a super complex exercise at all. Literally just jot notes down each day about what tasks you do and how long you spend doing them. Keep track for about 2 weeks and then give yourself, maybe half an hour to review what you've documented. You want to group your tasks into, say, sales and marketing, fulfillment or operations, or planning or growth-related activities. And once you've done that, then you want to kind of classify each type of activity as a $20 an hour task, a $200 an hour task, or a $2,000 an hour task. And the way you quantify that is by the impact of that time spent on your growth. So I don't mean how much it would cost you to pay someone else to do that task. I mean, by completing that task, how much would that completed work impact your business's growth? So if you spend an hour packing orders versus an hour planning a major product launch, you'll probably realize that order packing isn't a great use of your time in the context of what will help you grow your business. And then at the end of this time-sucking monster exercise, you should be able to prioritize what tasks and activities you can start to hand off. And there might be some activities that you can automate, such as some of your marketing, for instance. There might be some high impact activities that you know will benefit your business growth, but you also know you just suck at them and you have zero interest in getting good at them and you might need to outsource. And there'll be some that fit in between, right? And then it's time for step number 2, which is documenting how you want things done, particularly if you are going to hire either someone to join your team, whether they're casual or permanent, or if you're working with contractors or freelancers. Think of this as writing a recipe. So you might write a recipe for how to pack an order, for instance. And so you write the title at the top, then you have, you'd have your list of ingredients and a step-by-step method, if I use the recipe analogy there, right? And then you might also have some photos or maybe a video. And you can make this quite simple for you to execute. You can and probably should, this is what I've done anyway, get yourself a tabletop tripod that holds your mobile phone so that you can easily photograph or video yourself doing the task. Or if it's an on-screen task that you're documenting, maybe such as how to upload products to your website, use a free tool like Loom. So Loom is a screen video recorder app. It's really easy to use and it's fantastic. Use something like Dropbox or Google Drive to store all of your how-to documents. And I like to keep these sorts of process documents in folders that are really logically named so that it's very easy for other people to intuitively figure out where to find things. I also know some people like to use Google Sites. So if you use the Google Drive or G Suite for things like, Google Docs, Google Sheets, all that kind of stuff, they have a Google Site option, and it's kind of like a wiki style intranet. And it's really simply super easy to use. So that's a good one to look at. And then other people still like to use Trello or Asana for this sort of, housing all of these how-to documents or procedures. And then don't try and look at documenting your processes as one big, enormous project, as this is just going to feel completely overwhelming and insurmountable. Literally, just do one every time you are undertaking a task you haven't documented yet. So keep a document open on your computer next to the task that you're working on and literally just write out how you did it whilst you're doing it. And then over a period of weeks and months, you'll collect them all and it won't really have taken you much longer than had you just been doing the tasks alone. When you've done with this step, then you need to get your team to use them. And this is the bit like me training my young kids to make their lunches, where you've shown them how to do it, you've given the instructions to follow, and then you just need to let them have a go, knowing they might make a mess at first. On the other side of that mess is a business that can operate without you doing all the things, which is a business that you can grow because you are no longer the bottleneck. You become kind of like the conductor of the orchestra. You're setting the vision and the plan and then managing the team as they do the work to grow the business. Now, I'd love to hear from you, listeners, watchers. Where do you feel like you are at on that spectrum from total bottleneck to, hands-off business owner? All right, from here, I want to move on to the third critical skill that I've learned that I really want to pass on to you today. And in fact, this one is probably the most critical. Maybe I should have put it first. It's all about the mindset, in particular, cultivating a strong high-performance mindset. I remember many, many years ago hearing someone say that being an entrepreneur is a little bit like jumping off a cliff and then trying to assemble the parachute on the way down. It's scary, you never quite know what you're doing, and you might get hurt. But if you can pull it off, it'll be the most thrilling experience and rewarding experience of your life. The reality is, building a business from scratch and trying to grow it into the business of your vision and your dreams, you're basically trying to do something you've never done before. And there's inherent challenge in that, right? Tackling the unknown challenges your self-confidence. It challenges your belief in your abilities to figure this out, your belief that you've got what it takes. And fear of failure can totally derail you or hold you back. And I can't get through this bit without drawing an analogy with my kids and their swimming ambitions. I'm sure you knew this was coming. As you know, my two elder sons train something like 10 sessions a week now, and they have ambitions to make it to the Olympics one day. I have no idea if either of them will make it that far, but I tell you, it's really fascinating watching them tackle this big goal because they are so different from each other personality-wise. My eldest son is like the scientist. He researches other swimming greats. He watches, all their videos. He's watching their techniques. He's listening to what they say in interviews and all of that kind of stuff. And then he tries to apply it himself. And I have to video him all the time so that he can, not all the time, just in competition, so that he can watch himself back afterwards. And he's like this with food and nutrition and sleep and competition. He's listening to podcasts and YouTubers that help him to develop these, competition strategies and help him to maintain his focus and not to let his nerves derail him. He does get really nervous, but, that's part and parcel with it, right? And he's really good at just staying mentally present, in the present. He doesn't let his mind ponder the future or to think too much about, this Mount Everest-sized goal that he set for himself, which is amazing. My second son, he finds it a lot harder to not think ahead to that big goal. He doesn't worry too much about things like nutrition and, training and sleep and stuff like that. He kind of feels like his big brother is doing all of that research and he can just follow along for the ride with that stuff. Somebody else is figuring that out. And so my second son, he does, I've got a little flying thing buzzing around my nose. He really finds it hard to not think ahead and worry, right? He's had to learn some really specific mindset practices and to develop a bit of a toolkit of things that he can do to help calm his nerves, to help him not compare himself to others who are further ahead in their swimming career, and to help him bring his focus back to the now and away from that big future goal that seems so impossible. Which, hands up who feels like, they think about their business in that way and, have that comparisonitis and, just think about all of the things that they would need to do to get to their goal and feel stressed about it. So funnily enough, this son of mine has been learning similar strategies to help with all of this, is what I use to help me create a strong, confident mindset for me in my business or as a business owner. Of course, he didn't learn them from me because he's a teenager and what would I know? I'm just his parent. But fortunately, he has some access to some really great coaches and mentors in his swimming club that he does look up to. Anyway, so what are these mindsets that we need to adopt for success and how can we learn to, practice them or cultivate them? And unsurprisingly, we do need to adopt a growth mindset, which is something that my kids are learning in school these days, but not something that I was taught growing up. And really, a growth mindset is all about being a creative problem solver, being self-motivated and curious and open to trying new things, and not letting a fear of failure, stop you from trying those things. And if it doesn't work out, not assuming that it was or that you were a failure. And a growth mindset also kind of infers that your abilities can be developed through that kind of repetition and dedication and practice and effort, meaning that we get better over time with practice. So for me, I've always been, that kind of self-starter type person. I don't need someone to set tasks for me to complete in a certain time frame. I'm a fairly self-motivated kind of individual. And I'm also naturally a creative problem solver. And I would think that many of you guys are as well, if you've created or designed your own products in your business. But here's where I used to come unstuck. I was always worried about trying something new and worried that it might not work out. I think that my fear of making mistakes probably stems from my childhood and my schooling. I guess my generation would have been, taught in a way that where academic excellence was praised and mistakes were not necessarily punished, but fairly close. I'll never forget my younger sister failing her physics exam in year 10, and this is at school, and our dad was furious with her for failing her exam. And look, she's a graphic designer. She didn't need year 10 physics. It was pointless. Anyway, having a fear of failure or a fear of making mistakes is just so counterproductive in business. We really need to have the ability to have an idea or a hypothesis, to then test it out and be, happy to test it out and monitor the results without worrying if they're going to be a success or a failure, and then to use the empirical evidence that we get to inform our future decisions, which is basically that scientific process in action. And for me, I found that thinking of it in that way helped to make things less personal. It was my business producing the results, not me necessarily, and I could be a lot more objective in my approach with that. But in moments when I do feel my mind jumping ahead to a future full of what ifs that might feel scary, maybe I feel my heart rate increase or the adrenaline kick in too much, what I do is I use the square breathing technique. I don't know if you've heard about that, to bring myself back to the now. And it's just one of the strategies now that my second son is also using that helps him. So it's quite fascinating. I haven't spoken to him about the fact that, it's a well-worn strategy over time that I use as well, because he's using it and I don't want to stop him from going ahead with that. So all you do is you just sit somewhere quietly for a few minutes, maybe close your eyes, and then what you do is you're breathing in for a count of 4, you hold your breath for a count of 4, you breathe out for a count of 4, and again, hold your breath for a count of 4. And for me, when I'm doing it, I'm literally imagining my breath going slowly around this square, and it's a really calming practice. Literally takes no time at all, and it's really, really effective. So the second essential mindset that I've also found really, really helpful and pretty much essential in business is that of resilience and tenacity. And I think we all know that our trajectory in business is never going to be a straight upwards line of growth, right? We will, face challenges over time. Some of them are within our control and many of them are not. And sometimes, in fact, the only way to ultimately progress in business is to walk backwards a bit and then take a different direction, a different pathway. And we need to find ways to look at these situations that don't derail us and that help us to rest, recharge, and help us to get back on our feet or to try again or to find a different way around a problem. I find that to succeed here, it requires something that motivates you other than tying your sense of success or failure to a specific financial result, because quite often that's not going to be enough to motivate you or pull you through those challenging times. So putting time and thought into your big vision for your business and the purpose behind why your business exists is really helpful here. Is it just to make a bit of income for yourself, or can you find a bigger purpose or a more meaningful purpose rather, where your business might have maybe a positive impact in the world or in the lives of your customers or your clients? So in my first business, my modern cloth nappy brand, my big vision was to convert 30% of parents using our reusable products in order to have a measurable and positive impact on the environment, reducing the amount of non-biodegradable plastic going to landfill, and also just reducing the harm caused by the manufacturing of disposables. Now, not everyone's purpose needs to be that big, that's a pretty chunky thing to go for. Whatever it is, it just needs to be really meaningful for you, right? And ideally, tie it to something that's also meaningful to your customers, because, I think most of us have a little bit of altruism in us, and we really want to do a good job for other people. Where I've historically tripped up and where I see a lot of other business owners trip up is spending too much time thinking about that future vision or goal and only seeing the gap between where they are now and where they want to be. They see the gap and it makes them feel miserable. Hands up if that's been you before. Unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on which way you look at it, the universe has a way of delivering us more of what we focus on. So if we just focus on what we don't have, guess what? We get more of that lack. So here's the very simple, nifty trick that really helps with this. And the only way that I can really explain this well is to tell a story. I know I've told it before, so I'll be super brief. The story of 2 mountain climbers. So 2 guys, they it could be women. It was told to me, this story, as 2 men, whatever. And they are both equally experienced mountain climbers, and they have decided to go on an adventure together. They're going to go and tackle this really big climb. And so they're doing the same preparation as each other, the same training, they get the same gear, right? So there's basically equal abilities and input here. And they set about on their adventure, and one makes it to the top and the other one doesn't. The other one kind of gives up halfway. And what was different? The inputs were different. The training was, the inputs were the same and the training was the same, but the outcome was different. And it was really this practice that they each had at the end of the day. So the one that ultimately quit, he would get to the end of the day and stand there and look up to the top of the mountain and just think, oh my goodness, I've got so far to go. I'm so tired. I'm so sore. I just don't think I'm going to make it. And then, feel completely demoralized and miserable. Whereas the second climber climbed the same mountain, got the same distance up that day, but at the end of the day would stop and then look down the mountain and see how far he'd come and feel a sense of achievement and feel good about that. And then, sure, look up and see how far was left to go. But because he'd already felt like he'd achieved something, he was, feeling like he had momentum and, positive about tackling the next day. And so how does this apply to business? In business, there's a few ways you can do this. It could mean maybe documenting your 3 wins for the day or week at the end of the day. In life, it might be having a gratitude practice that you journal each night. I do both. So I have a planner book in business and I have a journal for the end of the day. So in business, I literally will write out my 3 to 5 wins for the week, and I focus on that before I spend any time thinking about what I need to work on next. They might be really small things, and usually they are, because week to week, you're not, knocking off ginormous projects every week, right? So, it's literally about where you focus your brain. And I guess, the neuroscience behind that would be strengthening certain neurons in there so that you are, strengthening the pathway of feeling really good about yourself and your business and your achievements so far. And, it starts to snowball after a while. You get better and better at it. You get stronger and stronger at staying positive, and it literally pays dividends over time. And it's such a simple thing to do. It literally takes about 1 to 2 minutes, and the impact on keeping a positive mindset is just so powerful. Now, the third important mindset for long-term success in business, I kind of feel like I shouldn't have left this to last, but anyway, here we are. And it really does come from the sport of elite swimming. It's about being able to outbore the competition. Or, in swimming, follow the black line. Because in swimming, you need to do the laps in the pool. It doesn't matter how talented a swimmer you are at the elite level, you just have to do the work over time. It's boring, right? There are absolutely no ways to shortcut that. A less talented swimmer will win if they put the hours of work in and you don't. And it's the same in business. But staying the course is really hard for creative people, and entrepreneurs are typically creative thinkers and visionaries, and many of you are inventors and makers as well. But business isn't or shouldn't always be about the shiny and new. Much of the time we have to rinse and repeat and just keep implementing the same stuff, which can be incredibly boring at times, hence the outbore the competition phrase. And when we get bored, us creatives can feel a little bit like there's a vacuum there that we need to just go and fill up, right? And, we feel like we need to fill it up by changing things up in some way, shape or form. And we go and chase shiny objects, or we keep creating new products without getting proper sales strategies in place for the existing ones, or, keep putting different marketing promotions out there without following through properly or without that consistent implementation. And chopping and changing or constantly doing new and different things can really hurt your results. Instead, we get much better results by being consistent with our implementation. And that consistency of effort and implementation is what I mean by outboring your competition. I know this, this will be especially difficult for many of you. As a creative person, when things are a bit slow, or you're in the low part of your sales cycle, or if you're just really over doing the same thing day in, day out, right? In reality, running a successful business long-term can be a bit like being a parent. There are things that need to happen day in, day out that keep the wheels going. And if you want to be more successful than the other guy or gal, sometimes you just gotta be able to put up with that boring, consistent implementation for longer than they do. And let's just put another vote here for documenting those processes and getting other people to do a lot of that stuff, right? And on that note, that brings me to the end of today's episode. I hope that you've enjoyed it. I hope that maybe you found one or two things that I've mentioned today that might be a little bit inspiring or helpful in one way or another. And I would really love to hear from you about where you're at. So jump inside our Rockstar Productpreneur Facebook group, or feel free to hit me up in a DM on Instagram or Facebook. Let me know how you're feeling in your business right now, maybe where you feel like you're winning or where you feel like you are struggling. And if you are keen to work with a mentor who's got some been there, done that before kind of experience that might shortcut your business growth journey, please just reach out. You can head to katherineLangman.com/work-with-me to book in for a free strategy session. I will, of course, put the link to that in our podcast show notes page to make it super easy for you to find it. But now, have a fabulous rest of the day and week, and I look forward to being with you again on the show next week. Bye for now.